Oh, need a refill. All right, fellas, I'm gonna put something together. The engine cradle from the Z28, well, it's got some battle damage. Howdy y'all, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Today, it's the beginnings of final assembly. I know you gotta start somewhere. So last week we were at ground zero, and now things get put on the car more often than they get taken off the car. So first up, I'm gonna do a little soundproofing on the interior. After that, we're gonna work on actually putting a big piece of one side of the car and a big piece of the other side of the car and, you know, put them together. So grab your popcorn, let's get started. Back at it today. And the goal for today is to get soundproofing in the interior of the shell here. I've got everything taped off. I'm trying something new. Back in the old days, it would be Dynamat, but you know what? Dynamat adds a lot of weight, and there's some other products out there now that I haven't tried, but I'm gonna try them. One of them being lizard skin. Now, let's go talk about lizard skin. I decided against Dynamat this time. Basically, you know, it's just time to try something new on that. So I've done a lot of research on lizard skin and just trying to see, you know, if it's better, if it's worse. Near as I can tell, it's an effective alternative. How's that? There's one problem. Lizard skin is about a little over $100 a gallon, and to do proper coverage on the inside of that car, it's going to take more than a gallon. So I'm going to try something. Going to do a little hat tip to a guy named JR on a YouTube channel called Driveway Engineer. He's done a little research on the the technical data spec sheet, whatever, not the TDS, but the other sheet on lizard skin. Basically, it's a water-based latex paint with microspheres or micro balloons in it. So what he did was he went down to Home Depot or Lowe's, picked up a gallon of water-based interior latex paint, which is the same stuff, and added micro balloons, which is what I'm going to do today. We're going to try it. So here are the ingredients. $23 gallon of latex paint, and straight from the Jungle website, glass microspheres, or excuse me, yeah, white glass microspheres. So the idea here is I'm going to take some of my paint, mix it into an empty can, probably about half a gallon or so. The idea, you can mix this at any ratio you want, but it will thicken it up. Now, this is water. You can thin it with water, so if I need to, I can thin it down. The idea being you need this to be about the consistency of pancake batter. And to spray it, I've just got an undercoat gun. Now this will come out at a little higher pressure than my HVLP guns. I'm probably figuring it's going to take somewhere between at 40, maybe 50 pounds. So I'm going to do a little experimenting with a piece of cardboard first when I get my concoction mixed up. Let's see what it looks like when it comes out. All right, so I got an empty can to mix in. Let's go ahead and open up our, don't need lacquer thinner for this. Let's go ahead and open up our latex paint. Seems that the hardest thing to find these days is actually a can of black interior paint. Give it a little stir to make sure there's no solids in there. All right, let's give this a try. I'm going to throw about a half a gallon in here. Let's see what happens. It looks like half. So the idea behind the microspheres is these are supposedly little tiny microscopic plastic air bubbles. So the idea behind adding the microspheres is it creates little microscopic air bubbles in the paint that are essentially permanent. And the air in that layer, the mil thickness of the paint, is where your heat and your sound insulating properties come from. And that's the theory behind coating products like this and like lizard skin, etc. So let's go ahead and start mixing this up. See what happens. So I got my cardboard test piece set up here. I'm starting off at 40 PSI. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, not atomizing very well. Let's kick the pressure up some. Okay, now we're on about 55 PSI. I still think I can do better than that. Let's see. It's just coming out a little bit thick, which is good, which is what you want, but you do want it to be textured a little bit. That's better. All right, let's give that a try. Let's move over to the car and see what happens. Went in and did the firewall. Now let's just keep going and see how it does here. Oh, need a refill. All right, let me work on the rest of this and we'll revisit it when I'm done. Got the sound deadening first coat sprayed in. Did a really good job. Took out a lot of the boom, echoey sound. There's a little bit left on the tunnel there. I think I'm going to go with a second coat on the floorboards, or the toe boards, I should say. The first part of the floorboards up forward, and maybe another coat on the back side of the tunnel. It's okay there, but it's just a little boomy right in there. So I think I'll do a second coat on those. You don't have to go all the way up. You notice I kind of just went halfway up on the side panels there. But one thing that is really important is to be able to get your wheel houses, because there's a lot of road noise that comes off of those. I'm going to hit another coat on those as well. And I also got the trunk area, which that all sounds really good. I think that's going to be pretty much maybe one more coat just for a little bit of thickness. We'll see. But just a little touch up on the sound deadening, and it will be done. I'm going to put something together. Time to put subframe on the shell. So I've got my body mounts. If you guys will remember, these are solid mounts. Let's see, I've got this mounts for the engine cradle, but that'll be next. First thing I'm going to do is get the subframe itself loosely bolted to the cradle here, or to the shell here. All right, to start off, we'll take our top mount, drop it into the pocket. Let me get the other side. Pretty close. I think I can start putting bolts in at this point. All right, we're under the car and we're lining up the subframe. Now I did this in a video before, but let's do it again. So the subframe ear here has got a hole in it. There's a corresponding on the passenger side slot, and on the driver's side there's a hole and a hole. Now you take I believe it's a 7/16 or an 11mm socket, and if you stick it up in the hole straight, it'll line up. Eventually, if you go and you get the subframe lined up, it'll line up with the hole. Unfortunately, I don't know if the light is good enough to see. I'm not lined up yet. Before I go too all fired crazy, lining things up, tightening bolts, etc., since this is going to be a permanent install, I need to think about Loctite. So Let me go ahead and put some Loctite on all of these bolts. All right, so Loctite's on. There we go. All right. Good. Now I'm still going to leave it loose. To about right there. Let me get Loctite on all four of the other three bolts, and then we'll align this. Now, we checked before and figured out that I'm a little bit off center there, but I've got a plan. So I'm going to stick that socket in there. I'm going to get my little pry bar. I'm just going to pull this over to where it's lined up, just like that. And we're going to tighten this bolt down. All right, we're going to do the same thing here. I'm losing traction here. All right. Okay, now let me go check the back, because I also have to make sure the back lines up with my subframe connectors. Guys, that turned into a giant mess because one of the cage nuts up in here came loose and was spinning the nut inside, so I had to go back and fix that and knocked all my alignment off. So at any rate, I'm lined up here. I'm lined up here, I'm good. Back in the back, I've got my subframe and my subframe connectors at the right distance on both sides, so I can put my doubler plates in. And everything is tight. Well, it's impact wrench tight. I now need to go and get the actual torque wrench out and do a final torque on these for the subframe to be permanently installed. Normally the manual says that the body bolts or the subframe to body bolt should be torqued 90 to 100 foot-pounds. That's assuming that there's the normal rubber isolator bushing installed. Since I've got solid mounts, that changes things. So I looked up the torque spec for a 5/8 11, so 5/8 bolt, 11-inch pitch thread. That's 121 foot-pounds. That's what I should torque these to. So let me hit all four of them real quick and make sure that I'm where I need to be. There we go. The subframe is in permanently. With the subframe in, I went ahead and temporarily, and it is temporary, and I'll show you why here shortly, got the engine cradle put in. Next thing I need to do is I need to get the rotisserie back on so I can flip the car upside down and finish the attaching of the subframe and the subframe connectors. But the problem now is I can't use the attach points I used before, because obviously they were using the attach points for the subframe. So can't use them, so I'm gonna have to fabricate something that I can come off of my front frame horns. I've got the car back on the rotisserie, got it turned upside down, and we're gonna do one more thing before moving on, and that is to finish tying the subframe into the body of the car. Wait a minute, what am I doing here? I've got subframe connectors. Yes, I do. However, I'm going to do one more thing which addresses the what I call the biggest weakness of the 60s and 70s GM unibody cars, and that is the bolt-on subframe with rubber isolators. You don't see that in Mustangs and the Dodge, what are they called, the B-bodies, I think, the Challengers and the Chargers. You don't see that. You see a solid connection and cross frame connectors which make the front subframe tie in solidly to the body of the car. In these cars' cases, they don't do that. And you've got rubber bushings which isolate the subframe from the body itself. And there's a lot of flex in that. And the way GM handles that is basically the fenders and the inner wheel houses and everything kind of works together to hold everything in place. And it doesn't do a very good job of it. So let's take a look real quick and see what I'm planning on doing. So here we are. The subframe obviously is permanently bolted. The engine cradle's in just temporarily. We're going to get to that here shortly, but let's talk about the subframe first. So we're solidly bolted here on both sides, and we're solidly bolted here on both sides. Now I'm going to put in fish plates that are going to tie my subframe connectors to the rear of the subframe. That is going to basically solidify this. And of course, as we move back, the rear subframe frame rails are tied in through the subframe connectors. So that will tie this together. So in theory, that makes a connected frame. So that solves one issue with these cars, and that is flex here in the middle. Okay, so we solved that with this. However, there's one additional thing that these cars have, and granted, your typical street car probably will never see this, but we do plan on, you know, maybe taking this to the track once in a while. So this is something that I always used to do with street stocks and modifieds, excuse me, not modifieds, but the early late models when you still used a factory chassis, etc. The problem with this is right here. The frame rail is actually elevated off of the body itself. So the only thing holding this part of the frame rail to the body is right here. And of course, this piece right here, in theory, is tied in to the car itself. This is, GM doesn't call it this, but this is the torque box, okay? But it's got one attach point, and that's it. So the only thing preventing the frame flex from here forward, in theory, is your cross member. And these things, basically these entire subframes are noodles. As a factory piece, I've stiffened this one up here, but it doesn't take a little bit of that noodle factor out. So how do we stiffen this up and at the same time tie it into the body where the perimeter, rocker panels, torque boxes, everything in here is a functional stiffening portion of the chassis itself? So I'm going to take and I'm going to go right across I'm going to call it the torque box. I'm going to go right across the torque box here. I'm going to take a 2x3 channel of 1/8 inch channel. I'm going to run it from the side of the frame rail, and I'm going to angle it to the pinch weld and just basically perimeter weld everything here and on the other side. And if you think about it, what I'm doing is I'm duplicating up here where it really needs it, because the angles are wrong. Everything is just wrong about this setup. If this bolt was right through the center of this frame rail, it would actually be better. But since it's off to the side and it's completely unsupported here, we're going to try and put some strength back in this. What I'm doing, basically, I'm tied in through the center of the frame rail here, through a cross member here. I've got a fully welded subframe connector and this cross member here, so I'm good here, and I'm fully welded back here into the rear torque box. So everything's good here. The only thing we're missing is right here. All right, so I've got my blanks rough cut. Can take obviously some trimming to make everything fit, but this is just going to slot right down in here and be a flush perimeter all the way around. So let me just get to trimming on this until it fits right. So there it is. I'll perimeter weld it all around here, all along the torque box, tie it into the pinch weld here, so that ties everything in to as close as I'm going to be able to tie the rocker panel, which extends up to here, and just give the frame a little bit more strength and a little bit more resistance to flexing, which is what we're really after. Before of course I'll clean this up. One of the things I do need to do is probably right about here, I need to drill a hole, maybe dimple it a little bit for drainage, just in case water gets up underneath there. Wouldn't want this to rust out. All right, I've got the areas where I'm going to be welding ground down to bare metal. I've got the inside of my piece coated in zinc chromate primer to protect it. So you need to clean up that little spot right there. There we go. So that'll fit right there. And the other side, cut, fit, ready for welding. So at this point I need to get my welding blanket and a bunch of tape and everything to kind of protect the finish that's already there. She asked, why didn't I do this before painting everything? And there's so many areas up underneath here that I wanted to get full coverage without just spray and pray, blasting paint underneath there, under the frame here, that I wanted to get everything painted separately so that I get a nice finish, and then all I had to do was just these localized areas here. It's a little bit harder, but it's doable. I've got my edges taped off, got a welding blanket all the way around, hopefully to keep any welding sparks from ruining my paint job. Let's tack it in and let's burn it in. Okay, let's take a look. Got a little bit of paint lifting right on the edge where it got hot. No problem, I'll just sand that back. Got good penetration all the way around. I got a good weld. All that smoke that you saw was the zinc chromate primer on the inside just heating up. Although I think I did set the tape on fire a few spots. But that one's done. I'll get the other one done. And next up, we're going to do the fish plates for the subframe connectors. All right, I can hear it. I can hear it through the computer. Let the complaining begin. Let the teeth gnashing start. Let the howls to the moon begin. Oh my! I just welded the subframe to the car. Yeah. Oh, you ruined it. You absolutely ruined it because now you can't remove the subframe. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you guys a minute. You done howling yet? Okay. Here's the deal. For anybody that says, oh, you ruined it because now you can't remove the subframe. Seriously? The subframe is considered a readily removable maintenance item on the car? No. How many times with your Camaro or Firebird or Nova or any other car that had a setup like this has removing the subframe been a routine run-of-the-mill exercise? It's not. It's usually the last thing that comes off the car when you're doing repairs or you're doing what I'm doing. So it's not a big deal. It really isn't. Okay, back to the action. I'm going to put a little paint on here. Now, you notice I'm not going to put primer on first. That's because the Hot Rod Black is a direct to metal paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna basically load this up. I'm gonna go 3 coats of the black, the first coat being essentially primer. See how it turns out. I'll get the pieces here, the fish plates, piece of wood there. You notice I'm not taping anything off. I'm going to choke my gun down so much that there's so little paint coming out. Hopefully I'll control the overspray. We'll see how that works. Okay guys, to finish this up this week, very quickly, this is actually going to happen next week, but the engine cradle from the Z28, well, it's got some battle damage. And of course this happened long before we got the car. Somebody at some point in the life of that car bounced the cradle slash cross member off a curb or a parking hump or whatever you call those things, or something. And at least once, twice, it's got some battle damage and some road rash. Granted, of course, you notice I've already painted it, and because I've been kind of trying to figure out what to do with it, and I figured, what the heck, we'll just put a coat of paint on it that I might have to remove later. Okay, back on track. 99.2% of people that look at this car are never going to see this. Problem is, there's 0.8% of the people, including me, who are going to see this, and this just my OCD is just, the bells are ringing. I got to do something about this. So option 1, repair it. Well, as a general rule, the amount of force required to remove a dent, it has to be equal to or greater than the force required to create the dent in the first place. I don't have the ability, the equipment, and there's no access to get back here to beat on this thing with the same force as a 3,500 pound car slamming on top of a curb. That's probably out of the question. Option number 2, replace the cradle. Well, of course, the factory doesn't service this stuff anymore. You can't buy one of these new. So that leaves junkyards. Basically, I've learned over the course of the last, well, since I've been trying to find a replacement for this, that there is a difference between a V6 powered a 4th gen F body and a V8. The engine cradle is different part numbers, and I don't know what the difference is. I think it has to probably with the engine mounting, which, you know, means I pretty much have to stick with a V8 cradle. And those things are unobtainium, at least ones that are in better shape than this one. So I have a plan, which I'll work on next week, but tell me what you guys think. What's the best way to fix this? Put it down in the comments, down there, and let me know. Give me some ideas. That's going to do it for this week, guys. I just flat ran out of time. I got to render this video. I'm going to be working on the engine cradle later today and over the weekend. Next up, more assembly, believe it or not. Fuel and brake lines, suspension. Get the car ready to actually sit back on its wheels. So next couple of weeks, lots of stuff to do. Certainly appreciate everybody watching. Big thanks to all you guys for tuning in every week. Please like, share, subscribe, notify, blah, 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 blah. It really does help me out. Getting really close to that 1,000 subscriber mark. Thanks to all you guys. We'll see you next week. Everybody, have a great day.